Wyoming Territory, 1883. The Bighorn country ran so wide and so empty that a man could build a kingdom out of silence and never once be questioned for it. And in the shadow of those mountains, on a spread where the gate stayed locked and the rules were set by one man's grief, the wind had a way of carrying the truth, whether anybody wanted to hear it or not. The Gate. Rafael Vega had worked for Nolan Bryce for 11 years and understood the man the way a horse understands its rider, not through words, but through weight and silence and the small shifts that come before a decision gets made. So when the woman appeared at the main gate on that Tuesday morning in late October, leading a sorrel mare with a leather medical bag strapped behind the saddle, Raphael set down the harness he was mending and watched. Not the woman. Nolan. She was young, mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair pinned under a riding hat. Wool traveling coat buttoned to the throat against the cold. She stood at the gate with the kind of stillness that said she'd stood at gates before and knew how to wait. The cottonwoods along the creek had gone gold and were shedding leaves in the still air. Frost glittered on the fence rails. The Bighorn Mountains stood sharp against a sky so blue it looked enameled. "Mr. Bryce," the woman said, "I'm Dr. Lenore Ashford. The Territorial Medical Board appointed me as physician for this district. I've come to introduce myself and offer my services." Her voice was clear, Eastern, not timid. Nolan came down off the porch the way he always came down, unhurried, shoulders squared, boots striking frozen ground like he was nailing it in place. He stopped 6 feet from the gate, didn't open it, didn't tip his hat. "We don't need a doctor," he said. "Every community needs. I've run this spread 15 years without anyone from town telling me what I need. I reckon I'll manage 15 more. She didn't flinch. She nodded once, gathered her mare's reins, and turned east toward the river. Her back was straight. Her pace was even. She did not look back. Nolan watched her go for exactly 3 seconds. Then he walked back inside and shut the door, and the sound of it carried across the yard like the closing of something heavier than wood. Here's what Raphael never said to anyone. He'd seen that look on his boss's face exactly once before the day they buried Elise Bryce. 12 years ago, this coming spring. It wasn't strength. It was the look of a man holding a door shut against something he couldn't afford to feel. And a man who holds a door that long starts to believe the door is all that's keeping him alive. From the upstairs window, Nolan's boy was watching. 12 years old, quiet as creek water, named Declan after his grandfather. He pressed his palm against the cold glass as the woman's figure grew small against the valley floor. That evening, Raphael found Declan sitting on the porch steps, chin on his fists, staring east. A thin column of smoke rose from the riverbank where the cottonwoods grew thick. "Pa shouldn't have sent her away," the boy said. Raphael pulled his collar against the dropping temperature. He could smell snow coming. 2 days out, maybe 3. He looked at that smoke, looked at the boy, looked at the closed front door. He said nothing. He agreed. 15 years, morning came cold and sharp, the kind of October dawn that cuts through wool and finds the bone beneath. Nolan stood on the porch with coffee going lukewarm in his cup, watching his men push the first gather toward the south pasture. 62 head of good shorthorn, fat on summer grass, ready for the drive to the railhead at Buffalo. 15 years he'd built this. Every fence post, every head of stock, every dollar earned and turned back into the land. After Elise died, after the doctor from town rode up 3 hours too late, with his sleeves rolled down and his apologies already half formed, Nolan had made a decision as permanent as a brand. He would never again wait for someone else to arrive. Not for doctoring. Not for anything. He'd set Declan's broken finger himself when the boy was 6. Stitched a ranch hand's torn arm with a saddler's needle and clean whiskey. Pulled a calf breech at 2 a.m. during a blizzard. Alone. Because alone was the only arrangement that didn't end in someone failing to show. He climbed the stairs after breakfast. The hallway was dim, curtains drawn at both ends. At the far wall stood the door he hadn't opened in 12 years. Elise had chosen the paint pale blue, like the Wyoming sky in April. She'd hung curtains inside the room. Pale yellow. This color catches the afternoon light. Nolan, the baby will wake up in sunshine every day. His hand rose toward the knob. His fingers hovered close enough to feel the cold brass without touching it. They fell. He walked back downstairs and pulled on his work gloves. There was a cattle drive to organize, and burning daylight never put a man anywhere worth going. From the ridge above the south pasture, he could see the river. The doctor's camp smoke still rose in a thin line against the valley floor. She hadn't left. Something about that unsettled him more than her arrival had. He turned his horse and rode the other way, but the smoke stayed in the corner of his eye like a question he hadn't been asked yet. The river camp. Lenore Ashford had been refused before. 11 positions in 4 years. Philadelphia General said they didn't hire women. St. Luke's in Chicago said they'd consider her application and never wrote back. A mining company in Colorado offered a contract, then withdrew it when she arrived, and they discovered Ashford was not a man. Can I tell you what she was really thinking when she pitched that tent by the Powder River? She wasn't angry. She was counting. She knew the arithmetic of stubbornness, and she knew it always had an expiration date. Every man who'd told her no had eventually needed a doctor. The question was never whether, it was when. She set up camp with the efficiency of someone who'd done it many times. Canvas tent, bedroll, cook fire ringed with river stones. She unpacked her instruments on a flat rock covered with clean muslin scalpel, forceps, bandage scissors, splints, suture kit, each item in its place. The same order every time. The arrangement was as precise as prayer. On the second day, a ranch hand rode down from the Bryce spread. Young fellow, maybe 19, holding his left hand wrapped in a dirty rag. Didn't mean to bother you, ma'am. Cut myself on wire yesterday, and it's gone sour. She unwrapped the hand. The wound was infected red streaks running toward the wrist like small rivers of trouble. Another 2 days, and he'd have been in real danger. Sit down, she said. This will sting. She cleaned the wound, applied carbolic acid, sutured the deepest part, and wrapped it in fresh bandage. 12 minutes. The hand stopped swelling by evening. The young man looked at her instruments laid out on that river stone like a surgeon's table in the wilderness. "You really a doctor?" "I really am." Word spread quiet among the hands. Nobody told Nolan. On the third morning, hoofbeats. A boy on a bay horse appeared at the edge of camp. Declan Bryce. He didn't dismount. He sat watching her grind willow bark for fever powder, his young face serious and still. After several minutes, he turned and rode back toward the ranch without a word. That evening, she heard cattle moving in the valley. The drive was beginning. She checked her supply of splints, bandages, and laudanum, not hoping for trouble, just ready for it. The drive. The morning of the drive broke clear and gold, October showing its best face before winter came to steal it. Nolan rode point with Declan beside him, the boy sitting his saddle like he'd been born to the leather. 62 heads strung out along the valley floor. Raphael on the left flank, 2 hands on the right, dust rising slow in the cold air. This was what Nolan understood. Cattle and distance and the rhythm of hooves against hard ground. 15 autumns of this. He could read a steer's intention from 50 yards. Feel a storm gathering in the shift of the wind. Push a herd 10 miles in a day and bed them down, calm by sundown. Declan kept pace without being told. The boy was capable beyond his years, quiet, watchful, steady. His hands on the reins were light and patient, reading the mare the way a good hand reads a horse, through feel and not force. Nolan watched and said nothing, because saying nothing was how he showed trust, and trust was the closest thing to tenderness he still permitted himself. By midday they reached the creek crossing where the valley narrowed. The banks were steep, the footing loose shale over packed clay. Nolan noted it the way he always noted it: quick assessment. Filed and forgotten. "Keep 'em tight through here," he called to Raphael. "Don't let the leaders bunch at the water." They pushed the herd across in groups of 10. The crossing went clean. Declan brought his horse down the bank easy, letting the mare pick her own footing through the shale, and Nolan watched the boy's hands steady, unhurried, trusting the animal. "You sit a horse better'n most men I've hired," Nolan said. Declan looked at him. That was the closest his father came to praise. They both knew it. The boy almost smiled. That night they camped where the valley opened south. Father and son sat by the fire, eating biscuits and salt beef while the stars thickened above the mountains. Cold and close as scattered ice. "Pa, yeah, that woman, the doctor. What if somebody gets hurt out here and she's the closest help we got?" Nolan stared at the fire. A log split and sent sparks corkscrewing upward into the dark. "Nobody's getting hurt." The words hung in the cold air like a promise the universe was already breaking. Motionless in the dirt, Lenore was grinding willow bark when she heard the horse, not trotting, running, hoofbeats hammering the frozen ground with the kind of urgency that doesn't need explanation. She stood and wiped her hands and saw the rider before she recognized him. The older man, the foreman, the one with the quiet eyes who watched everything and said nothing that wasn't necessary. Raphael pulled his horse to a sliding stop, the animal lathered and blowing. "The boy," he said, "fell at the creek crossing. Shale gave way underneath him. He ain't moving." She didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. And here's the part that matters, she also didn't rush. A doctor who rushes makes mistakes that can't be taken back. She packed her bag the way she always packed it. Instruments, bandages, laudanum, splints, same order. Every time. How long since he fell? Maybe an hour. We moved him to flat ground, kept him still. I don't know if that's right. It's exactly right. Did he hit his head? Blood behind his left ear. Is he breathing steady? Yes, ma'am. Then we ride. They covered the 4 miles hard, pushing through the valley with the mountains watching from both sides. Lenore asked questions the whole way: how the fall happened, which side he landed on, whether he'd moved at all. Raphael answered everything he could, and what he couldn't, he said so plainly. They crested the rise, and she saw them. The herd scattered loose across the flat, 2 hands standing back with their hats off, the way men stand when they've reached the edge of what they know how to do. And Nolan Bryce on his knees in the dirt beside his son, holding the boy's hand with both of his face stripped down to something beneath every wall he had ever built. Declan lay on a spread blanket, eyes closed, left arm angled wrong below the shoulder, blood dried in a dark line behind his ear. Breathing. Lenore dismounted and walked to the boy without breaking stride. She knelt, set her bag open, began her examination with hands that did not shake, pulse steady, breathing even, pupils responsive. The collarbone was fractured. She could feel the displacement through the skin, concussion, but the skull was intact. No spinal deformity. She looked up. Nolan stared at her. His lips moved once, twice, like a man trying to remember how speech worked. Then one word came out of him, dragged from somewhere deeper than pride, deeper than 15 years of locked gates and sealed rooms. Please. Conditions. That word cost him everything he believed about himself. Please meant you needed someone. Needed meant you were waiting. Waiting meant the person might not come, might arrive 3 hours too late, with their sleeves rolled down and their useless sympathy already forming on their lips. Nolan had built his entire life around never standing in that hallway again, never watching a door he couldn't open, never depending on another human being's arrival. But Declan was lying in the dirt, and the woman he'd turned away was the only soul within 40 miles who could help. She worked with hands that didn't tremble. She cut the boy's shirt open at the shoulder with scissors that caught the October light. She felt along the collarbone, pressing gently, reading the fracture through her fingertips the way Nolan read cattle tracks through mud, the same focused certainty, the same practiced calm. Fractured collarbone, she said. Clean break, not badly displaced. Concussion, that's the blood behind the ear. He needs to be stabilized, kept still, and watched through the night. If we do this right, he'll mend clean. And if we don't, the bone shifts, punctures something it shouldn't. The concussion needs monitoring if the swelling worsens. I need to be there when it does. Tell me what you need. Lenore sat back on her heels. She looked at him steady, and in that look was every closed door, every unsigned contract, every man who'd told her the world didn't need what she carried in her hands. "I'll help your son," she said, "but I have conditions." The old reflex rose in his chest sharp, automatic, 15 years strong. But Declan made a sound, a small breath, broken at the edges, the kind of sound that strips a father down to raw wire. The reflex died where it started. "Name them. You open your ranch as a medical practice, 2 days a week. You send word to every homestead within 30 miles that a physician is available, and you stop telling people they don't need a doctor, Mr. Bryce, because that is a lie you have been telling yourself for 12 years, and today it nearly killed your son." Her voice did not waver. She wasn't cruel. She was precise. The way she was precise with a scalpel, cutting only what needed cutting, and nothing more. He would never have called it prayer, but kneeling in that dirt, watching her steady hands move across his boy's fractured collarbone. Something inside Nolan Bryce that had been locked since the day they buried Elise finally heard the key turn. "Agreed," he said. One word, and the door opened. "Then help me lift him," Lenore said. "Gentle now. Support the shoulder. We're taking him home." The night watch. They brought Declan to the ranch house at dusk, Nolan carrying the boy in his arms like he weighed nothing and everything at once. Lenore walked beside them with her hand on the splinted shoulder, monitoring each footfall, each shift of weight. They laid him in the downstairs bedroom. She bound the arm properly padded splint, cotton wrap, the shoulder immobilized against the chest. She checked his pupils again, his pulse, the wound behind his ear, cleaned the dried blood with warm water, and pressed a fresh bandage against the skin. "He'll wake when he's ready," she said. "The body knows what it needs better than we do." Nolan pulled a chair beside the bed. His thumb moved across his son's knuckles in a rhythm that was older than language back and forth. The way you'd gentle a foal, the way you'd tell someone you were there without making them carry the weight of words. Lenore sat across the room by the lamp. She checked Declan every half-hour pulse, breathing, pupil response, between checks. The house was quiet. Wind pressed against the windows. The fire in the next room ticked and settled. "His mother died in this house," Nolan said. She looked at him. He wasn't looking back. His eyes were fixed on his son's face as though memorizing it against some future loss. "Upstairs, room with the blue door. She was bringing him into the world and something went wrong. I rode to town for the doctor." He paused. "Rode harder than I ever rode anything in my life. He got here 3 hours after she was gone. I'm sorry. I locked that door the same night. Haven't turned the knob since. Figured if I kept it shut, I could keep..." He stopped. Started again. "I don't know what I figured. That the door was holding something back, maybe holding the worst of it inside where it couldn't touch the rest. Here's the real reason Lenore set those conditions. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't leverage she'd calculated by that river. She had watched too many frontier communities lose people to pride, men who wouldn't call for help until the calling came too late. Women who suffered through fevers in silence. Children who needed care that never arrived because somebody's father decided needing was the same as failing. She wasn't negotiating with Nolan Bryce. She was refusing to let it happen here. "Where did you train?" he asked. "Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. 4 years. Graduated second in my class. And nobody would hire you. 11 positions, 4 years of closed doors." She paused. "I came west because the frontier doesn't care about your diploma. It cares about your results." "I reckon that's true enough." Silence held the room like a third presence. The lamp flickered. Declan stirred beneath the blankets, his breathing changing rhythm. His eyes opened unfocused, confused, then settling. He saw his father. He saw the woman. He closed his eyes again with the particular peace of a child who knows he is being watched over and doesn't need to understand by whom. Nolan stood, crossed the room, climbed the stairs. Lenore heard his boots stop at the far end of the hallway. She heard a door open, the low groan of hinges that hadn't moved in over a decade. The particular complaint of wood swollen tight by years of stillness. He stood in that doorway for a long time, long enough for the lamp downstairs to gutter once and steady. When he came back down, his face was different. Not softer exactly. Unlocked. "There's a room upstairs," he said. "Blue door. Gets good morning light through the east window. Might work for a surgery." The open gate. 3 days later, Declan was sitting up in bed demanding to know when he could ride again. 6 weeks, Lenore told him. "And not 1 day sooner, young man. 6 weeks, Pa. Tell her 6 weeks." Nolan said, "Don't argue with your doctor." Your doctor. He said it the way a man says something that has already become true before he noticed the way you'd say your home or your family, without thinking. Because the thinking happens somewhere beneath the words. Can I tell you something about that morning? The neighbors had begun arriving at first light. Word travels fast across open country. A boy hurt. A doctor nobody knew about. The stubbornest rancher in the Bighorn foothills suddenly talking different. By mid-morning, 8 horses stood tied at the rail, ranchers, homesteaders, a few hands from spreads farther south, men who'd always nodded when Nolan said they could handle their own. Nolan walked to the gate. Raphael was watching from the barn doorway. The hands had gone still. Lenore stood on the porch with her medical bag at her feet and her hands quiet at her sides. He put both palms on the gate, the same gate where he'd stood 5 days ago, and told this woman to leave, and swung it wide. The hinges groaned, long and low. The sound of something opening that had been closed so long the iron had forgotten how to move. He turned to face the gathered men. "I owe you all an honest word," he said. "I've been telling myself and telling every one of you that we don't need help from nobody, that a man handles his own. That's what I believed." He stopped. Let the wind move through the silence. "My boy fell from his horse 4 days ago. Nearest doctor was 40 miles east. The only help within reach was the woman I turned away from this very gate, because I was too proud and too afraid to admit I might need somebody." He looked at Lenore. "She saved my son. She's a physician trained back east." Better than any doctor I ever seen work. She's gonna practice from this ranch, 2 days a week. Anybody needs help for themselves, their families, their hands you ride here. His voice was steady now, not loud, not performative, just a man saying something he meant down to the marrow. The gate stays open, silence. Wind moved through the cottonwoods and sent gold leaves spinning lazy across the yard like small, bright offerings. Old Orrin Jessup, who ran the spread north of the creek, cleared his throat. My wife's been having trouble with her back since August. Didn't want to make the ride to Buffalo. Bring her Thursday, Lenore said. Another man spoke, then another. A hand from the Jessup ranch asked about a shoulder that hadn't set right since spring. A homesteader's wife mentioned her daughter's cough that wouldn't clear. Lenore came down the porch steps and stood beside Nolan. Not behind him, beside him. She extended her hand. He took it, not the grip of a man surrendering, but the grip of a man who had finally learned that the bravest thing a person can do is open the gate they once locked and stand there while the world walks through. Morning light pouring through the east. Morning light pouring through the east window, the way Elise Bryce had always wanted it to. Inside, a medical examination table had been set up, good oak, plain smooth, built by Nolan's own hands in 2 days of quiet, focused work. Lenore's instruments were laid out on clean muslin across that table, arranged in the same careful order Raphael had first seen on a flat river stone the day she'd stitched young Pete's hand without being asked and without asking anything in return. He noticed that Nolan set 2 cups on the porch railing each morning instead of 1. He noticed Declan walking the south fence line with his arm in its sling. Lenore beside him, pointing at plants along the creek bank, bending to show the boy something in the root structure. The boy was asking more questions in a single walk than Raphael had heard from him in a year, and Nolan watched them from the porch, not checking, not supervising, just watching, with an expression on his face that Raphael hadn't seen in 12 years and needed a moment to place. It was peace. Can I tell you something about watching a man change? It doesn't happen the way you'd think. There's no thunderclap, no moment where the old person vanishes and someone new appears in the space they left. It's quieter than that. It's a gate that used to be locked, standing so wide the hinges have settled into the new position. It's a door shut for 12 years. Now letting in the kind of light a woman once promised her baby would wake up in every morning. It's a man who ate standing at the kitchen counter for a decade, now setting 2 places at the table without deciding to, the way the heart does things the mind hasn't caught up to yet. Raphael had ridden for Nolan Bryce for 11 years. He'd thought he knew the man, his silences, his rituals, the precise weight of his stubbornness. Turns out he'd only ever known the locked version. The man standing on that porch now, holding 2 cups of coffee, watching his son learn the names of healing plants from a woman he'd once turned away, that man. Raphael was meeting for the first time. Lenore stepped up onto the porch. Nolan handed her the 2nd cup without a word. She took it the same way. They stood together looking out over the valley where the cottonwoods had burned to full gold, leaves falling slow as grace across the pasture where the cattle grazed fat and calm. From down the south road, dust rose. Another rider, coming toward the ranch at an easy pace. One of the homesteader wives, probably, arriving early for her Thursday appointment. Lenore set down her cup and straightened. Nolan didn't flinch, didn't tense. He looked at the open gate and nodded once. The quiet nod of a man who has stopped fighting the one thing that was trying to save him. The gate was open. It would stay that way. Maybe you've never stood at a locked gate on a frozen Wyoming morning, but maybe you've locked something else, a door, a room, a part of yourself you decided was safer shut. And maybe, if you're honest, you know exactly what it costs to keep it closed. The bravest thing isn't building the wall. It's the moment you put both hands on the gate and push it open, knowing you can't control what comes through. That's not weakness. That never was.